Alright everyone, it's time for a little bit of philosophy within the occult here with the occult video 169. Is might truly right? Now this term has come up several times recently, a little bit of synchronicity there, which is why I thought I'd make this video. I believe that it was brought up in the Fuentes debate actually, if I remember correctly, and of course what I said is might does make right on an objective physical level, but not a moral basis. On the subjective, pragmatic moral basis that's built by mankind, it's much the same as human culture. A lot of what we do, the legalism, the laws that we create, the social norms that we craft, objectively speaking, there's no objective, unless you presuppose the existence of a deity or of some cosmic force that, sends the law down to mankind, as Nick Fuentes does. Unless you assume that, there's no objective basis behind it. Therefore, to me, and to many others, and I think the majority of occultists, it boils down to a subjective side. What's the pragmatic use of that legal system? Is the law pragmatic? For instance, I look at the drug war, and I would say there's no objective moral basis. The concept that it is objectively wrong for a person even to string themselves out until they die, that's a moral judgment that is subjective. It's your opinion. It's not based on objectivity. But as far as the culture, looking out for its success in general, in a biological basis, literally continuing to have generations replicate, continuing to survive in the most strict sense, the culture being strong, being, more, culturally intact, having a tight enough weave to resist the corruptive forces from the outside, whatever they may be, warfare, economic downturn, strife. As far as that goes, the drug war on the surface makes sense because they're like, well, I don't want people to be addicted over and over. Then you dig down to the tertiary level, you find that it's another layer of it not working because simply on a pragmatic level it doesn't work. You can make up whatever moral arguments you want. You can make up whatever high-minded sounding utopian dream arguments that you want for why it should be a good idea. It simply doesn't boil down to actually, in reality, working. It actually creates more addiction. You would think of the concept of killing. The concept of killing, aggressively, murdering somebody else. Objectively speaking, there is no actual prohibition on, unless, again, you presuppose an absolute objective central authority, a god or whatever. There's no objective basis to say that it's morally wrong. But as far as culture goes, it certainly is. If people began murdering one another at a whim, you wouldn't have a culture for very long. Very soon, another more stable culture would supplant you. They'd call you barbarians and they'd conquest. You'd say, these people, all they do all day is butcher each other. We're just going to replace them. And obviously, they don't know how to govern things very well. Look, half their population dies every year. They have to constantly have orgies just to have enough of a core population left. Eventually, there'll only be one of these crazy barbarians, and that'll be the last one. They'll probably kill themselves because there's no one else to kill. So on a pragmatic basis, of course, yes, absolutely, you want to keep murder illegal. This is the case for a great many things. Now, as a libertarian, it's very funny that Might is Right would be asked in that situation because Might is Right, the book, is actually a libertarian manifesto, sort of on the objectivist Ayn Randian side. But ultimately, it is about personal liberty. Now, if I have personal liberty, another person should not aggress upon me. If they do, I should have the right to defend myself. It's all about balance. It comes down, in a way, within legal systems and within the occult, to the concept of balance. This is definitely true within the occult. You have chaos and order. They're complementary. They're flip sides of a coin. They don't actually oppose one another. They complement, balance one another, and thus things are maintained. If you don't have the chaos, the death, you don't have any form of renewal or life. A person's body, as it gets older, it begins to degenerate. If they didn't die and those molecules that they're comprised of weren't recycled by other younger, more living life forms of some form or another, you'd have nothing but decrepitude on the entire surface of the world. It'd be a world of liches. It'd be a world of zombies, basically. We'd all be thousands of years old. We look like mummies. There would be no vibrancy anymore. It would all be stagnation, and it would tend towards total heat death in the most significant sense. My belief, of course, that things like the Big Bang, being the ultimate source of all chaos, is also the ultimate source of all order in life. Chaos brings forth order. Order eventually degenerates into chaos, and it cycles around forever. I know I'm getting off track, but it has a similar overlapping facets to the concept of might is right. So what I would say is simply this. Might is absolutely right. If I have the physical capability to force you to do something, then technically speaking, I simply do innately have the ability on a physical level, pragmatically within that situation. But the other person of course, is thinking about the same thing and saying, if I have the might to resist that force, to kill that person or to defend myself in some other meaningful way, or culture defends itself, it brings about that balance. The victim has a gun too and can defend themselves. That is a good thing. That balance is what creates an avoidance of that potentially abusive scenario. The concept of balances within the government, checks and balances, of split government, having a triune system, a legislature, a judicial system, and then an executive. That's for exactly the same reasons. It's to create balance. It's to prevent abuse by having multiple poles of power that can oppose one another in an abusive situation that will compete as well. It's very capitalistic. The very basis of this is very capitalistic. The concept of chaos and order is almost a primordial statement of capitalism, in a way. It happens within the business world as well. A business should be cutthroat. It shouldn't have morality. It should absolutely try to destroy its competitors. Others should do the same. Only when an imbalance becomes evident should there be any interference within that private marketplace at all. This is why I believe totally in a free market. The only intervention that should exist is to crack apart monopolies, which are like tumors in which there's no longer competition. Something is broken through all available competition, and now it can no longer really be competed with. You have to it has to split itself apart into sub-firms that seem to compete even though the parent company is not, which, by the way, is a total workaround situation, shouldn't exist. No, companies should be singular. There shouldn't be such a thing as parent companies in that sense. A sub-part of the company, yeah. But having a firm with a totally different logo that appears to compete with its own parent company's holdings is really a workaround to distract people from the fact that we're already under a monopolized economic system. Largely, there are monopolies. Largely, the successes that we're having are due to the rudiments of capitalism that are left over in the form of increasingly small businesses and entrepreneurship, and the occasional upstart that manages to rise up to corporate status, only to then become part of that same non-competitive, monopolistic deadwood over time. Google is making this transformation. Originally, of course, competed with the giants, now is one of the giants, the most giant of all. Amazon, same thing. And so you have problems. These big firms can only compete with one another. They can't, because nobody else can compete with them. It's a very limited amount of capitalism at that point going on. But might is truly right. Yes, absolutely, in the pragmatic sense. In the situational sense, if I'm the one holding the gun, I have the right to do whatever I want. However, if you've created balance, if the other person is willing to resist, then no, might does not make right. On an objective basis, the same lack of objectivity that allows that statement to be made also allows that statement to be negated. Because another person could say, no, the fact that you have the gun doesn't make you right, and I'm going to do whatever I can to get the gun away from you. Well then there lies your balance. Hopefully the other person is equally armed. Then respect is bred. Those two people hopefully leave one another alone. If they don't, one of them will be destroyed. Possibly both of them. Have the gunfight at the OK Corral, and someone shoots. The bad dude gets shot and the good dude gets shot by the bad dude at the same time, and so they're both sort of sitting there, they drink their last whiskey and say, oh yeah, it was a pleasure shooting you. Essentially, you have those situations. But yes, that would be my statement, at least, on the topic. As far as an objective moral basis goes, I don't believe in it, but you don't need an objective moral basis. You don't need a God in order to explain why there should be law and order. There should be law and order to prevent abuse, to allow for enough balance to have a polite, pragmatic society. Again, totally subjective that you would want a pragmatic, polite society, but most people simply do. It's simply the innate biological nature of man to organize within reason. There's also the tendency towards wanting individualism, to be able to escape from that and even to cheat within an ordered system, to use a little bit of chaos to sort of get around your competitors. A little bit of that goes a long way. It can be a very good way for someone to get ahead. Yes, absolutely. Somebody's stabbed one of their business partners in the back, metaphorically speaking, and now they're much, much richer and more powerful as a result. They sabotage some other business. As long as that's kept to a low, minimal simmering within society, it tends not to destabilize it. It's when you get the innate tendency towards corruption. The innate tendency of man is to try to get one over on others. It goes back to our primitive biology. It's literally from the caveman days. Look, back then, definitely there was always the possibility you'd be in a situation where it's me or him, essentially. There's only one saber-toothed tiger steak left. We're both very hungry. I'm going to pound him over the fucking head with my club. I'm getting the steak. because I want to replicate, I want to survive, to breed, have kids, my genes will be perpetuated. It's literally the selfish gene sort of thing going on. It's literally what it is. Of course, in modern society, we don't need quite so much of that caveman mentality. Again, it can still serve you well. It shouldn't be totally suppressed, but it can be a very negative thing from time to time. There's why you want balance within your system. You want things to be capitalistic. You want things to be competitive. You also want things to have the rudiments of order such that that capitalism, that competitive spirit, that tendency towards mankind to occasionally maybe stab somebody in the back is kept low enough so that society doesn't destabilize, because then even those that have risen up through the meritocratic system might get destroyed. The society, even the strongest elements of a society can be destroyed through instability of that type. We've seen it time and time again through a coup, through a war, through a depression driven by speculators, something along those lines, or driven by intervention, as the U.S. depression, of course, was. It was driven by the government. It wasn't driven by private entities. That's about all. Peace out.